Welcome back to the weekend with Anthony Oprin here on Sports Radio 910. Oh yes, it's that time again. Time for our outdoor segment, and we're here to welcome in from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, as always, Chris Dunnavant. And Chris, last week it was Bob Duncan, the director of the DGIF, talking turkeys and all of the turkey calls and crow calls and the owl calls. And this week we're going back to fishing, but another special guest to really bring us some expert insights into fly fishing this week.
Absolutely. We couldn't have a better guest for that topic. We've got Beau Beasley. He's a native Virginian. He fly fishes from the mountain brook trout streams of the Shenandoah National Park to striper fishing in the salty waters of Chesapeake Bay. And, of course, he loves fishing plenty of farm ponds in between with poppers for bluegills. And he's a prolific writer of fly fishing topics and also the director of the Virginia Fly Fishing Festival. So welcome, Beau.
Thank you so much, Chris. I enjoyed being with you and Anthony today.
Well, Beau, I guess first and foremost, just give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you became such a fly fishing savant.
Well, it was quite by accident. I'm actually a full-time firefighter and paramedic for Fairfax County. And I actually ran a rescue call one day with a gentleman who was having trouble breathing, and I ended up taking him to the hospital. And in the back of the mobile intensive care unit, we struck up a conversation, and he told me he was a fly angler. And I said, well, I've always wanted to learn how to fly fish. And he said, well, how about if I teach you? So he offered to give me his phone number, and I wrote it down, and I called him about a week later. We went right back out to the pond at Burke Lake, which is where I picked him up, and he took me under his wing and taught me how to fly fish. And his name was Bob Guess. He was one of the best popping bug makers in the country at the time. I had no idea, who the guy was. It's kind of like having Tiger Woods offers to give you a few golf swing lessons. I had no idea who the guy was, and wow. He introduced me to the sport, and I took to it like a duck to water, and I've loved it ever since.
Now, wait a second, Beau. I got to go back just 1 second. You guys had this conversation while in the back of an ambulance after he had trouble breathing.
Well, yeah, as a paramedic, part of your job is to treat people, but the other part is the human aspect, is just kind of connecting with them. And, when people are in the back of an ambulance, they're really nervous. So I try to talk to them, and I ask them things that they're interested in. And I just asked him if he'd been out fishing at Burke Lake, and he said no, he'd just been out walking around and got stung by a bee and had a bit of a reaction, and we just struck up a conversation, and it lasted for a lifetime. He and I were friends for many, many years until he passed. But he bought me my first fly rod, took me out to Burke Lake. I caught my first bluegill on a popping bug that he made, and I just said, "Wow, I've really got to get into this sport." And I knew nothing about it, and it's not nearly the mystical thing that people think it is. It's just about going out and having a good time and catching whatever's available where you're at. And in my case, it started at a farm pond, basically Burke Lake in Fairfax County, catching bluegill, and now I've had the opportunity to fish all over the country.
Chris, I love that anecdote because it kind of speaks to what we were talking about even before we came on the air. We just met up here at the Sports Radio 910 studio about how fishing is an escape. And obviously in this situation, a little bit of anxiety, and what do? You talk fishing.
That's right. When you're fishing, it's such a great opportunity to put aside all the cares or difficulties of life, and you can just enjoy that time on the water and also fellowship with a friend. Fishing is just a great medicine in that regard.
I love it, Beau. That's really good stuff. Well, tell us a little bit more about what you've got going on here coming up next weekend, the Virginia Fly Fishing Festival out in Waynesboro. And, as we've kind of discussed prior to this conversation, this has become a really big deal, not just regionally and locally for Waynesboro, but even nationally.
Absolutely. This will be our 12th annual Virginia Fly Fishing Festival, and it's held in, April 21st and 22nd in Waynesboro. And interestingly enough, it started, it's outside. It's the largest outdoor fly fishing event in the country, actually, now. And we're expecting over 2,000 people over the weekend. And it's held on the South River, which was the very first urban trout stream harbored or husbanded, I guess, by the game department. And this is a honest-to-goodness trout stream that runs right through the middle of town. And a few years ago, the local townspeople said, hey, we ought to celebrate this river. So now we have the Virginia Fly Fishing Festival, and we have vendors that come in from all over the country and attendees. And, you know, I remember years ago when I was first hired as the director, we got excited when people came from Roanoke. And this past week, I actually took an order from a gentleman who has taken a paid casting class that's flying in from Alaska.
Wow.
So we have many of our travelers that drive here come from as far north as Syracuse, New York, or as far south as Atlanta, Georgia. So people that are driving 8 and 9 hours one way to get here, you know, it's an event.
Beau, in your opinion, what is it about the event that makes it so attractive, that would make somebody want to come from Syracuse or come up from Georgia?
Well, two things. Number one, it's fun. It's an outdoor fly fishing event, so you can learn a skill and then go right out to the river and do it. But I think it's the overall atmosphere. One of the bum raps about fly fishing is people think it costs a whole lot of money, or you have to know how to speak Latin. You know, you have to know all the Latin names of the insects or the fish. And that's simply not the case. You can get started in fly fishing for not a whole lot of money, just like any vehicle. You can buy a Yugo or you can buy a Maserati. They're both cars. You just have to, you know, work at your budget is what's best for you. But we're very educationally intensive. We take everything from the rank beginner that doesn't hardly know which end of the fly rod to hold to people who book trips to literally fish all over the world.
You're joined by Beau Beasley with the Virginia Fly Fishing Festival. He, along with Chris Dunnavant for the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly wildlife conversation here on Sports Radio 910. And, you know, Beau, you talk about the accessibility of fly fishing. For somebody who really hasn't ever gotten into it, what's the best way to get started?
Just to come out and let somebody kind of disciple you. Just take you along and say, here's the fly rod. Here's the mechanics. It's totally different than spin fishing. In spin fishing, the weight of the lure or the bait pulls the line out. In fly fishing, it's exactly the opposite. The fly line itself is weighted. You cast the line, and the fly goes along for the ride. So, and what most people are fascinated by is they normally think of fishing for brook trout up in the Shenandoah National Park. But on my first book, Fly Fishing in Virginia, I specifically took a picture of a gentleman who caught a striper on the back for the back cover out of the Chesapeake Bay. And people are shocked to find out that fly fishing, we have flies made to look like shrimp or made to look like crabs or bait fish. You can catch practically anything on a fly rod, even tuna. So it's just a matter of coming out and being exposed to it. It's like any other sport. You're never going to learn how to play tennis until you go out on the court and pick up the racket. So it's the same kind of thing. You just come here. There's a variety of classes, everything from the very beginner fly casting class taught by Steve Monahan with Temple Fork Outfitters, which is one of our sponsors from Texas, or booking an international trip to go, you know, fish in Ireland with Harry Robertson, who owns Hanover Fly Fishers, or he also takes people to Alaska. So it doesn't have to be fishing at some exotic location. I enjoy fly fishing because I can do it right in my backyard. I can go out to Lake Brittle here in Fauquier County where I live and have fun with my kids. And that's what this festival is about. That's why it attracts people. It's fun. It's not intimidating. Of course, it doesn't hurt that we have 7 wineries there, too. So you pay your $20 to get in, and then you take all the classes you can possibly take, and there's free wine tastings included with your admission for those that are 21 and older. We also have a children's section. We actually have a children's trout pond where the kids can come, catch the fish, see what a brook trout or a rainbow trout looks like. Then they actually put it in a bucket Anthony, and walk over with their parents, with the help of the game department, walk over with their parents and release the fish into the South River.
That's awesome.
So some angler later on next week will get to catch it again. So it's all about education and having fun, and all this very angler friendly with kids. We have free casting lessons for children, and any child that comes with a paying adult, we don't care if you got 9 kids. If they're 16 or under, they get in for free. As long as mom and dad are there with them, or their uncle. We have grandparents that bring their grandchildren. We're just looking to have a good time, teach people about fly fishing, and if we build up a family environment activity at the same time, all the better. I think that's why it's drawing so many people.
That sounds great, Beau. You said there's a real heavy educational component. How many different classes there are offered at this festival?
We offer 24 different classes a day, and so it all depends on what you want. If you want to learn about striper fishing or shad fishing or fishing for salmon in Alaska or fishing for smallmouth bass on the Shenandoah. If you want to learn things about conservation, you can learn about menhaden and their important link in the food chain by classes given by the Herring Alliance, which is our conservation sponsor. And, people from the Chesapeake Bay and Potomac River Keepers, so there's a conservation bent. And, there's a little bit of everything. One of the things I'm excited about this year is we're hosting our first women's forum. So we actually went out and recruited women instructors, and there will be a class given every day at 12 o'clock just for women, taught completely by women about how to get involved in fly fishing. And as far as we know, we're the first ones to ever do anything like that in the fly fishing industry at this kind of level, and we're really excited about it.
I've absolutely gotten the answer to my question, Chris, about why people would come from all over to attend this event. Beau, it sounds like you guys have all of the bases covered with the Virginia Fly Fishing Festival. Where can folks find out a little bit more information about it?
Well, if they're interested, they can get all kinds of good information at our website, which is www.vaflyfishingfestival.org. And there's all kinds of information. They can look at the schedule. Now, we're not selling any more advanced tickets, but they can buy tickets at the gate. And if there are paid classes that are limited to just a few students for $75 if they want to take those, but there are plenty of free casting classes. Just go to the website, vaflyfishingfestival.org, and they can learn about our sponsors like Subaru and Dominion and all the people that help us put this together. And the most exciting thing for me is we take in money from sponsors and vendors and the individual that comes, and then we pay all our expenses off. We divide the money in half. Half the money goes into promoting the festival the following year. The other half of the money goes directly into conservation efforts on the South River.
It's great stuff, Beau. Really is. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before I let you go, obviously I think people have found out that you've got a wealth of fly fishing knowledge, and as Chris made reference to, a prolific fly fishing writer. Where can folks find out a little bit more information about you? I understand BeauBeasley.com?
Yes, they can go to BeauBeasley.com. That's spelled BeauBeasley. Just go to my website. I'm very fortunate to write for a variety of publications like Virginia Living, which is out of Richmond, Virginia Sportsman out of Charlottesville, and I'm also the Mid-Atlantic field editor for Eastern Fly Fishing. So I try to write for as many publications as I can, and I truly enjoy writing for Virginia Wildlife. I have an article in the current issue about striper fishing and in and around the city of Roanoke and the Roanoke River. So Virginia just has a wealth of opportunities just most people don't know. And our goal is to educate people and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Chris, you know what the one thing I love about the guests that you've brought on this show thus far is that every single one of them have one thing in common, and that is they are so passionate about what they speak about or the subject matter that they deal with, and Beau certainly falls right into that category.
Yeah, you're right. People love what they do, and it's easy with fishing to just fall in love with it. It's definitely a passion for folks, and it's just such a wonderful sport, wonderful thing to be involved in, and it's some great people. So it's just a real privilege to be a part of fishing.
Can I say one more thing before we go? The game department is actually going to be there So you can come to the festival and actually get your fishing license there. And I think that's kind of cool because they teamed up with DMV, and I tell people you can check your license and make sure all your registration tags are up with your vehicle and get your fishing license at the same time.
Works out pretty well. Beau, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. Sincerely appreciate it. And Chris, as always, thank you so much for lining up another great guest.
Yes, it's been great to be here, and thank you, Beau. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Anthony. I hope to see you guys at the Virginia Fly Fishing Festival in Waynesboro next weekend.
Yeah, that's Beau Beasley with the Virginia Fly Fishing Festival, vaflyfishingfestival.org. And you can also check out more about Beau Beasley, BeauBeasley.com. Stay tuned when we come back here on The Weekend with Anthony Opperman. Got my game plan for the weekend as we bring another show to a close.
The show is almost over, but the weekend is just getting started. More of The Weekend with Anthony Opperman is next on Sports Radio 910.